with the holiness of God. It's very beautiful, really, because we don't like the word sacrifice anymore. You know, when we think of those who made the supreme sacrifice in the Second World War or the First World War, it chills us a little bit. It doesn't stir us so much these days. In fact, we don't like the word sacrifice. We prefer the word self-fulfillment. But we've forgotten what the word really means. And, you know, in the Old Testament, there are different sacrifices. I'll talk a little bit about those for a minute. There are what they call holocausts, where the whole thing is burnt. And that's a sign for people of adoring God, adoration, a real sense within, as I give this wholly to God, of adoration before the mystery of life, before God. Sometimes they offered food or incense, and they did there with a great sense of gratitude to God for the gift of food, for the gift of life. Sometimes, as we know, and we saw this in the readings during last week, there's the use of blood. Blood is spilt and blood is shed. And that's got a strong sense of atonement for sins. Finding myself at one with God again and confessing my sins. Blood, new life, and so on. And finally, there's meals, sacrificial meals, where I'm sharing this sacred meal and feeling one with God. So, with these sacrifices which don't appeal to us, who wants to burn a lovely bird or beautiful cow or whatever? But really that's a primitive thing, but behind it is the attitude, the beautiful attitudes. And can I just then go to the prophets for a moment, because they tell us what the inner attitudes are supposed to be. So I'll go firstly to the wonderful Amos. And Amos was the prophet who lived 700 years before Jesus. And here's something he would say. And this is because people are doing their sacrifices, but their hearts aren't there. I hate and despise your feasts. Amos chapter 5. I take no pleasure in your solemn festivals. When you offer me holocausts, I reject your oblations. I refuse to look at your sacrifices of fattened cattle. Let me have no more of your din and your chanting. No more of your strumming on harps. Sorry, Brett. No more, but rather let justice flow like water and integrity like an unfailing stream. Did you bring me sacrifice and oblation in the wilderness for all those 40 years, house of Israel? And so on. That's Amos. And can I also now read you the beautiful, the wonderful Isaiah? Jesus would have known Isaiah backwards. Hear the word of Yahweh, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the command of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What are your endless sacrifices to me? I'm sick of holocausts of rams and the fat of calves. The blood of bulls and of goats revolts me. When you come to present yourselves before me, who asked you to trample over my courts? Bring me your worthless offerings no more. The smoke of them fills me with disgust. The feast of new moons, Sabbaths, assemblies, I can't endure festival and solemnity. Your new moons and your pilgrimages I hate with all my soul. I'm tired of bearing them when you stretch out your hands. I turn away my eyes when you multiply your prayers. I don't listen because your hands are covered with blood. Wash, make yourselves clean. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Search for justice. Help the oppressed. Be just to the orphan. Plead for the widow. Very, very typical of the prophets trying to get us away from the externals into the deep attitudes of our faith with God. And you know that beautiful Psalm 50 that we pray, that gives us a strong, or 51, whatever you wish to, you can call it either of those. Sacrifice gives you no pleasure. Were I to offer holocaust, you would not have it. My sacrifice is a broken spirit, a humbled, contrite heart you will not spurn. It's the heart, the spirit, that's at the heart of prayer. And of course, if we go further into this, we must go to Isaiah 53. And we see all this in the person of one human being, the great sacrifice this one human being makes. And it goes a little bit like this. You know it because it's a beautiful thing. As the crowds were appalled on seeing him, so disfigured did he look, that he seemed no longer human, so will the crowds be astonished at him. Like a sapling he grew up in front of us, like a root in an arid ground. Without beauty, without majesty we saw him. No looks to attract our eyes, a thing despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, familiar with suffering. And yet, as it goes further, like a lamb that is led to the slaughterhouse, like a sheep that is dumb before its shearers, never opening his mouth. Yet ours were the sins he bore. Ours were the sins he carried. I can't find it, but it's there, okay? So trust me. Trust me. So we've got now, in one human being, the suffering servant, this sense of offering his life for others, as a sacrifice for others. And of course, we see that fulfilled in Jesus. So sacrifice is an extraordinary thing, but it's giving of oneself ultimately for others. And we know we live when we give rather than take. And finally, can I just have a brief little word? Now, all this that we've read today makes sense a little bit of that fabulous book of the Hebrews, because the book of Hebrews is all about Jesus as the real high priest. And I just read one little passage for you, just to make this real for you, where there is a clear comparison. One passage now where there's a clear comparison with what the chapters we've been looking at about the high priest and Jesus, who is our high priest. It's from chapter 9, the book of Hebrews, verses 11 to 14. But you could pick other places as well. But this just gives us a good idea of how what we've been reading this last week makes a lot of sense for the writer to the Hebrews and gives us a sense of how significant Jesus is. But now Christ has come as the high priest of all the blessings which were to come. He's passed through the greater and more perfect tent, which is better than the one made by human hands, because this isn't of the created order. And he's entered the sanctuary once and for all, not once a year as the high priest did, taking with him not the blood of goats and bulls and calves, but his own blood, having won an eternal redemption for us. The blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer are sprinkled on those who have incurred defilement, and they restore the holiness of their outward lives. But how much more effective